Welcome to another episode of Engagement That Scales with Rachel Happe. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Shannon. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. We are excited for today's chat.
Friday. It's the first chat about technology. And I've invited Alan Pelz-Sharpe here because he looks at internal collaboration, community engagement, content, some content management stuff. And I thought he might have an interesting perspective. And it's been a while, Alan, since we have caught up. So how have you been? And what have you been up to?
Well, I've been better than right now, but no, we've been busy. We've been really busy. I started my own company, analyst company, coming up to 3 years now, I guess.
Oh, congratulations.
3 years, yeah. And no, so it's been good. Like anything, has its ups and downs, but yeah, I still cover those technologies. Always have, probably always will, whether I like it or not. And it's a fascinating time, and I don't want to pull positives from a terrible situation because I think that would be rather unpleasant. But as an analyst, I have to be honest. The current situation is utterly fascinating because it's showing so many new things, but also just putting a spotlight on old problems that nobody ever bothered to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we're absolutely seeing that on our end as well, which is, we were going along, getting along, things were, carrying on. All of a sudden this hit and people are like, oh, digital, yeah, we do that a little bit over here, but now we need to do it everywhere, and we're not really set up for that. So so we're having a lot of those conversations too. Who are your primary clients? Are they companies using technology, or are they the vendors themselves?
They're both. I mean, in full disclosure, we certainly, the people who build the technology certainly do help pay our bills significantly. I've always tried to keep a balance. I think the danger as an industry analyst is that you can get caught up in the virtual bubble, right? Briefing after briefing, and you all believe that everybody's doing the most amazing things, and the world is so advanced. And I love to, I always have tried to at least keep my feet on the ground. So talk to a lot of enterprises, and the past few years, a lot in supply chain, which is an area which technology is ignored almost from day one. And yeah, just seeing the reality of a warehouse operation versus the the YouTube videos of robots doing everything and no people. The reality and the dream are
actually, it's funny you mention that, because I started, I think I might have been the first analyst covering the social software space for IDC back in the day, and I liked it because I have a technology background, and you can totally geek out over what's possible with technology. But I did feel like I was talking about theory and not what companies were actually ready to do or able to do. And so I really, now all of our research is about where are you now?
Yeah, and that's really what we try and do. I mean, I'm not interested in the technology silos, right? Which obviously if you're an IDC or you're a Gartner, and those are great companies, by the way, but it's just a different business model.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how people actually use things and how people actually do things. So
tell me then, right. That's a great segue, which is, tell me what you've been, I've moved kind of over to the management leadership side, although with one foot still in the technology, but I'm not solely focused on the technology anymore. So what are you seeing, and what's changed over the last couple of years? That's a big
what I'm seeing and what's changed, they're actually two different things. In the sense that if we take something like AI, right? AI has been a hot topic for a long time. My colleague and I, we published a book last year, and which was surprisingly successful, actually. I mean, you know, there's a big audience out there for it. That's the reality, right? So, you know, if you take things like artificial intelligence, blockchain, IoT, 5G, cloud, whatever, you know, all these transformative technologies, I mean, they're all happening, but are they actually happening at a grassroots level? Not really. Not really. I mean, there's just not that many adopters of these technologies, and I think that's what's changing, though. So to come to the second part, I mean, I've mangled your question around here, but to get to the second part, I think that's what's changing. I think honestly, there is a realization that there's a lot of things we should have done. We didn't.
Give me an example.
Well, for example, let's just take the current situation. I mean, so I'll give you a real world, maybe two, whatever. I'll keep them short. So there's a healthcare, I mean, obviously be very careful what I say here, but there's a healthcare organization I'm aware of. They really, they're not primary healthcare. I mean, they're sort of a sort of backup organization. They would really like to have their workers working from home now, for all the obvious reasons. Ain't possible. Ain't possible, because if they are not sat at those specific desks, logged in on that specific PC with that specific phone at the side of them, with that, keep using the word specific here, but with those specific applications on tap, they can't do their job. And that's happening, you know, a lot, where people have said, you know, oh, you know, yeah, this sounds a good idea. Let's get people working remotely. We'll save on office costs. And now they're suddenly realizing, well, no, that person had to tap or tab between 3 different applications just to find one piece of information. I mean, that's not.
My brother works in the financial space, and the compliance and security around that is so intense. And it's not that you can't set it up for remote, but
but in a lot of cases you can't. I mean, I think that's it. I mean, yeah. Again, to your point earlier, in theory, in practice, you can't. So I think there's a lot of things. I mean, you know, I always say document management, most dull topic that's ever hit us, and I do write about it. But I mean, it's not exciting. It's not sexy in any way, shape, or form. But people are suddenly realizing, oh my God, people actually do need to get access to those things securely. And so they can't.
Can I ask, like, we're really, and our audience really cares about the internal social network, the collaboration. They care about the security, of course, like the platform architecture pieces. But how is that playing alongside all of these big technical trends? Like, what's happening in that space?
Yeah, and there's a huge disconnect is the bottom line, right? I mean, I think there's a couple of examples. I'm very wary of sort of calling out specific vendors because you can't make anybody happy. But yeah, I mean, I think if you take a company like Cisco, I mean, for all their faults, they do sort of get it that it's not just about video conferencing, right? They do get it that this has to integrate into other things. But most of them don't care because it doesn't make money for them. So I think you just do have a commercial reality that a lot of people, whether we call it enterprise social networking or everybody's calling it just, you know, online conferencing or whatever, collaboration tools, it's not made commercial sense for them.
That's so interesting because that's not exactly what we're seeing. And to be fair, our research population is probably on the advanced end, so that's not necessarily a mainstream slice of the market. But the biggest business objective that internal community and ESN programs can connect to is culture change, transformation and culture change. And so that's a top line, meaning that has to do with innovation and learning and adaptation. And we're absolutely seeing that on the external side, where online communities used to be all very transactional. It was a customer support cost savings play, more or less, when it started. But now the biggest business objective they can connect to is customer loyalty, which now that's a top line thing. And so we've seen this real shift over the years of understanding that, oh, if I can speed up communications, make it transparent, the whole organization can move that much faster. Now,
yeah, but you see, but that's so I'm in complete agreement with you. But as you said, you know, the people you talk to are here,
yeah,
and they're doing cool stuff. The people I talk to, they're not doing cool stuff, and they know it, right? I mean, you know, the people, but you take again, I always have to be so cautious what I say, but so here's a real world example.
Mm-hmm.
There's an insurance company that I know. Super cool online, really super cool online. You should see their back office. Knee deep in paper. Yeah. People doing mountains of manual key entry. I mean, we did a little piece of work for citizen services, sort of government things. And you know, again, it was all about, let's move this to online, let's make this a super experience. And I agree with all of that. That's not wrong. You know, they are thinking right. But then they find out that there's a back office process which takes 3 weeks and it's manual and it ain't changing. And so how they bridge those realities or those aspirations and back office realities, I think is a real challenge.
Why couldn't you change that back office process? What's getting in the way of that?
Well, a few things. I mean, you know, well, one, I mean, you know, again, if I was to not talk to end users, if I was just to live in my virtual bubble, I would simply say, well, it's because they're not actually embracing all the technologies which are available to them, robotic process automation, machine learning, whatever. I mean, you know, certainly the technologies are there. That's not in question. The technologies are there. The technologies are way advanced compared to where people think they're at, I would say. The biggest ones, yeah, it's change management. It's change management. And it's an old problem. It's not new. You know, you go in and you bring in, who should we pick on today? Accenture, PwC, I mean, you know, McKinsey, if you've got the money. They can absolutely design a better process. Implementing it and going through that change management is horrible. It's painful. People don't like it. People fight back. It's not the technology.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big part of the work we do right now, is like changing how we change, because in my view, that the transactional or the design piece of changing a process is the easy piece, right? Like, and I feel like we end up having this like perception that we need experts for it, right? We need outside people to come in. Like, I bet if you took somebody in that process, took them out, put them in a room for a while and said, redesign this process, they could probably come up with a better process themselves as well. Maybe not the McKinsey process, but like they could improve the process. And to me, like the place communities sit is in co-creating meaning and change, right? Like, it's bringing people along with you so that you're not just dropping things on people. And so I think that's why we're seeing that culture change thing bubble up, because people are understanding that if you can use, what we think about it is like in communities, you can like prompt these micro behavior changes that people don't object to. And then you can say, just turn the other direction. Do that for a while, and then like, oh, maybe pick your leg up. But you can do it rapidly and iteratively in a way that gets the big change much faster, and you haven't disrupted an A to Z process. You've changed it from A to B to B to C to C to D.
Totally. I think, though, so I'm in agreement, and you know that's great. I think where there are, I know to make myself really unpopular here, but I think there are times when you do just have to go in with a heavy hammer. I mean, if you take something like blockchain, right? With you know, we could, but I won't get into the technology here. But you know, essentially, it's an extremely simple concept, a shared version of the truth. You know, term that's been around a long while, but for the first time, technology can actually deliver it. So, you know, we only need one copy of the contract. We only need one copy of the invoice. You know, Technologies are, we could literally, you know, start up a blockchain instance this afternoon, swipe a credit card, we're up and running. It's done, right? Getting people to say, well, what do you mean I don't get a copy anymore? What do you mean I don't get to, what do you mean those are the challenges. And if we look at, you know, I don't think we coined the term, just be clear here. We're certainly using it a lot, but I have no idea who did coin the term, but, you know, supply chain thinking. I think that's sort of what we've got to move towards, that we've got to start realizing that, yes, my organization is really important. Yes, it's got problems. I should be doing something about them, but I don't exist in isolation. I'm part of a bigger ecosystem. And that supplier or that partner or that customer or whomever, right? So it's a community, if you like, right? I'll use your term. It's a community, and we have to respect the rest of the community. And I think technology is going towards providing you with, I mean, stuff that were just unimaginable 10 years ago. I mean, it's there, it's available, but changing the mindset.
I just had that at top of mind too, because even in our work, and we see this during this crisis, people are moving meetings online, they're moving conferences online, they're moving content online, whatever it is, they're moving online. And it's very funny to me. It's like once you're over the hump, you can't unsee it, but on the other side, people can't see it. And you're like, I'm watching my coworker at home in Zoom meetings for 6 hours a day. Today, he's on 3 2-hour Zoom meetings. And I'm like, right? Like, this is not how you do digital, guys. No. Like, you're missing the opportunity because your mindset hasn't shifted about how work has to get done. And so it's that kind of, and to be fair, it's one reason I moved away from technology and into management and leadership, because it's power dynamics, it's relationships, it's anxiety and defensiveness, and like how do you bring people together so that they can learn and move together. And
well, it's interesting because I mean, so I always have stayed in technologies, you know. You know, a little known fact about Alan, I once trained as a psychotherapist, an analytical psychotherapist.
Oh, that's
so I'm actually fascinated by the change. Yeah. And, you know, having been trained that way, I can't sit in a meeting without reading the room, and, you know, it's just second nature. But that's actually what I find fascinating. The technology, I wouldn't say it's easy to understand. There is a learning curve there. I mean, there certainly is. You know, I was very breezy about blockchain, but, you know, at its core, that's really complex stuff. But it is much more about mindsets. And I think that's what's interesting. I mentioned supply chain before. I mean, you know, again, yeah. Everybody's just ignored it. It's just like, well, yeah, our food gets here, medicine gets here. I order a chair online, and it somehow magically appears. And I think, you know, in this crisis, I think we are. I would hope, at least, we are suddenly a little bit more aware that, you know, some of us are very privileged. We have MacBook Pros, and we have home offices, and but that's actually not the real world.
Well, so like my issue with the supply chain stuff is there's all these externalities that don't get accounted for, right? And so some of us, populations of people, are starting to think about, like, what's the environmental cost, for example? Like, we haven't ever really thought about how much gas and carbon emissions it takes to get our tomatoes here. Well, now I can get hydro tomatoes from Maine. That's a lot closer than the Florida tomatoes, you know.
Yeah, but again, yeah, and again, and so I am a tree hugger to my heart. Trust me. My daughter went to a Waldorf school. We try and eat organic. I mean, so I'm on board. I think though, when real world example. So organic honey. I did a project last year. I was out in the south of Brazil near the Uruguayan border. It's a blockchain project. And what a wonderful company. I mean, they support all the local, what do you call people who make honey? I don't really know, but we'll call them honey producers anyway. But hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and they do this and da 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 da. And now I buy local honey, right? So just want to get that one clear. But the fact is, when we get into the reality of the global supply chain, I'm with you. I mean, there are all of those issues, but I would argue that equally, the supply chain is desperately inefficient. It runs on appallingly tight margins, and buyers have ridiculous expectations, right? So it's a whole confluence of problems. It's not just buying veg out of season.
My perspective of that, coming from the relationship angle, I was talking to somebody about the RFP process, and I was like, the RFP process is so political, like it's a political thing. It's like it doesn't actually get you to a relationship with a vendor that has some shared success. It's very transactional. And she was kind of saying, well, what do you do about that? And I'm like, well, the whole process is messed up because there's no trust. It's all transactional, right? Like we've stripped business of, okay, I want to work with a supplier who I know may not have the product I need right now, but I know I'm going to make a commitment to them. They're going to make a commitment to me, and we're going to build this together. And I think that needs to go across from the consumer to where they buy their things all the way back to the supply chain. And I think that's what the global supply chain has sort of broken, because we don't have those externalities built into the economic model, meaning our accountants don't account for them, right? So we don't.
No, you're right. And I think, the RFP process, that's very close to my heart. I mean, I spent six years, was it, with Real Story Group. So that's all we did. And, trust me. I mean, I literally walked out of a couple of, literally walked out, like stood up and walked away, when it became clear that no, the internal politics had already decided that, despite the fact that we were going to go through a multiple week process, it was going to go to this supplier. Yeah. That was decided event. But so no, I'm with you, and I think it is. But you touched on it. It is about trust. Yeah. And that's where technology can thrive, but can struggle, right? This is where machine learning falls flat on its face a lot of the time. You look at a situation, you say, oh, I can understand these patterns, I can do that. But then you find out, well, no, these are actually human beings. And because they made that decision based on those facts this time, doesn't mean they'll make the same decision next time.
Yeah, for a long time, I've been saying that the humans are the weakest link, because we've got all this great technology, but there's still a person that sits at the front end and the back end of it.
To be argumentative, humans are the strongest bit, right?
They can be,
yes.
Right? Like they can be your weakest link or your strongest link.
They can. I think, it goes back. I mean, my career really has all been around sort of Silicon Valley, sort of my second home. And I don't know how many times at a conference I've said it just to be argumentative, but nobody likes to hear it, is that, the reality as to why people are buying technology X, Y, and Z is because they're going to automate things and lay people off. That's the goal here. That's the goal. We all know it, folks. What does automation even mean? It means sacking people or not hiring new people.
It's so interesting how technology really exposes these rifts that are they're human things. They're not technology, but technology kind of brings them to a head and kind of reveals them back to us.
Mm-hmm.
I would say very much that's what I've been watching with this crisis too, which is, all of these kind of pressure points just expose some of the issues we've had for a long, long time. And I mean, my hope is like the crisis finally gives us some urgency to fix them. But
yeah, and I don't know whether I'm an optimist or a cynic or where I sit on that sort of spectrum, but I think it is interesting. I think out of it there is going to be maybe a bit more of a holistic viewpoint that everything doesn't exist in isolation. I was talking to a good friend, Robin Daniels, who he's got the most sort of stereotypical in a good way Silicon Valley story. He turned up at 98, 99 with a one-way ticket and a bit of coding experience. Then as of last year, he was running global marketing for WeWork and Facebook and goodness knows what, right? So, he's had that story. But, my discussion with Robin was, is there a shift going on in Silicon Valley, right? Are we just building things for our friends as opposed to actually looking at the real needs of the world and saying, could we actually help here?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that there is a shift going on, but I think even a 1 degree shift would be a good thing.
Yeah. So on that note, I think that's a great place to end because I also have that question, meaning I've looked for a long time. Silicon Valley is such a bubble. And I remember as an analyst, people were building things for their friends in Silicon Valley. And I was like, I remember Faceforce, the plugin for Salesforce to do biz dev on Facebook. And this was like 2005. And I was like, outside of Silicon Valley wants to do that, actually.
Really wants to do
it. I mean, I don't know. I don't believe it. But what, so I like to wrap these things up with like, what's one thing that's caught your attention lately? Like one detail, one article, one concept, one idea that's just like you're mulling.
Well, it's a few months back now, so it's pre-pandemic, but it's still very, very timely. So I don't know when you might predate you, Rachel, but knowledge management was the hot thing in the .com era, right? I remember my first knowledge management conference, huge. I mean, sold out the San Jose Convention Center. I mean, this was big stuff, right? And then it fell into obscurity, right? Because the technology simply could not deliver on the promise. And I think what's been fascinating the last year has been now with machine learning, particularly with machine learning, those concepts are being revisited. And there is a lot of work going on. There's a company called Guru, the Microsoft Project Cortex, two good examples, sort of a startup and the big guy there, who are basically looking at information and knowledge and how we work together and just basically saying, hey, some of these old ideas were actually really good ideas. Maybe we should come back to them now. It's very techy, I know, but the fact is, back in the day, asking people to type in a form and saying this information is relevant to it was never going to happen. Nobody was ever going to do it. Was now you don't need to. Yeah. You can point systems, and it does a really rather good job. Yeah. So I think the resurgence or the reawakening or the back from the dead, whatever KM world thing.
Yeah.
I think over the next 4 or 5 years, that's going to be really interesting, particularly in online collaboration.
Yeah.
I think that's going to.
It's because it's interesting. I went to both the APQC, spoke at the APQC conference last year and KM World for the first time ever, because I think, which is related to what I was going to say, which is there's still that tussle between top-down structure and control and bottom-up that I don't know that has been completely resolved on the KM side.
It's not been resolved, and it probably never will be. But the fact that you can actually use artificial intelligence now to read documents, extract concepts, auto-classify, push them to people, it's actually pretty accurate.
Have you seen Otter AI? I keep telling people about it because it's
I have. We haven't written about them yet. I don't know if we will, so just in case they're listening. I'm not promising to write about you. But yeah, I mean, yes, and that's been the thing. The last, I'm going to say year rather than 18 months. So many AI-related companies are popping up, and it's really to do with extracting useful information from, as we would like to call it, unstructured data. Something that's been talked about forever and never really worked very well.
Like one of our big things, and that actually kind of segues with what I've been doing, and my mind is completely on our research because I've been absorbed in it lately. And one of our big ratios, and it's kind of, it kind of was an aha, I mean, not a complete aha, but it put a fine point on it. When we built our ROI model for engagement, it's search and successful searches and discovery of what's been captured that adds the value. And so any of those tools that you can put on top of the conversation up that ratio. And right now, average ratios are somewhere from around 30 to 50 to 1, right? Like, which is like, if you go to executive, that's the number you care about because that's the marginal value you're getting off of captured data.
Well, you actually hit it on the head, and that's sort of, I mean, it's not that secret or anything, but that's sort of one of our big initiatives this year is enterprise search. A topic I covered in great depth years ago, and nobody was interested. And maybe they won't be this time either, but it is absolutely fascinating that enterprise search has been around forever, still doesn't work. And so we're working with, I don't know if you know him or not, but the very great, the rather wonderful Martin White in the UK. Oh, he is the search guru. He is a wonderful.
I was going to say, I used to work for the IDC search guru who's in Framingham, Sue Feldman. Do you know her?
I know Sue, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating area, and for analysts, it's been one of the most frustrating because it's to be blunt, it hasn't moved very far. And if you ask anybody in an organization, they can't find stuff. So we're sort of looking at that, and I don't really know where that research will go. We'll see as the year moves on. But
right, because it's I used to say when I worked for Sue, I was like, it's peanut butter and jelly. People like to hunt and gather, and the hunting is the search, and the gathering is the social stuff. And if you don't have both, you know, like it doesn't taste as good at the end. You get like problems one way or the other. So like figuring out that problem is very a lot. Like we don't talk about it a ton because we're talking about getting the valuable engagement. But that valuable engagement is 10x, 30x more valuable if you can get the discovery.
Well, absolutely, and that's why I don't even like the term search. I mean, we like to talk about findability. Not that anybody else is ever going to use that term much, but you know, to me, search says, well, why do you search for something? Because you've lost it. I mean, it's a pretty negative term, right? So anyway, we'll see how it's going. We published a report.
Great point to end on. Like if you're not thinking about search or AI or findability, discoverability, whatever you want to call it, that is absolutely something that just it greases the skids of all of it. Like it.
Oh, it absolutely does. It's really important. It's also really hard to do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Alan. It was delightful to catch up with you and hear a little more about what you're thinking about. And there's a lot going on. And I wish you well.
Thank you. Same to you.
Have a great Friday.
Bye.